I promised that we would set aside time for the Shedeur Sanders again, so let's do that. Let's do sound off here. Deion Sanders was on the Say What Needs to Be Said podcast with Asante Samuel. He was talking about the reports that his son Shedeur wasn't prepared for all the meetings he had ahead of the NFL draft, that might have been why he fell to the 5th round. Here's what Dion said.
When you sit up there and say something like, he went in a meeting unprepared, like, dude, Shedeur Sanders, who's had 6 different coordinators, who has still functioned and went up, level up every time we brought somebody new in, and you're gonna tell me you're gonna tell me he had on headphones, Shedeur. Anybody know my son, understand he's a professional. Like, he's gonna go into a meeting with headphones on, like, y'all come on.
Okay, so look, we can just move past whatever it is that happened. Him falling to the 5th round is something that happened and is never going to be undone. Tim Hasselbeck, I will continue to say I think he wound up in a great spot. I think he wound up at a team that should have a legitimately open quarterback competition that he can win. And if he is as good as he thinks he is, and as basically every evaluator that I paid attention to over the 4-month period leading up to the draft thinks he is, then I think he has an excellent chance to win that job, be it early in the season or at some point pretty early, either at the very beginning or some point pretty early in the season. Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with like 99% of that, Greeny. He ended up in a good spot because they don't have an entrenched starter. So right there you have a chance, which, look, most of the time you don't get is a 5th round pick. So that right there is really all you can ask for when you're a 5th round pick coming to the National Football League as a quarterback. Now, I think what I would just push back on a little bit is that, look, just because somebody may be good enough, I saw it, throughout my different stops, in my career. Just because somebody was good enough doesn't mean that they were going to end up as the guy. Just there's limited reps, there's limited opportunity. Sometimes the sample size you get to prove it is small. Sometimes other guys, runway, or sometimes coaches get it wrong. There are so many factors to why it often doesn't work out where the best player is playing. Look, it happens. It happens at every single position, but it really happens at quarterback when there isn't an entrenched starter and there's multiple guys vying for a job.
Dominique.
Yeah, I think that we like to assume that the best player always wins. I think that Tim did a good job explaining why that's not the case. But I think Shedeur probably has a better chance than most late-round picks. Like, if Dillon Gabriel never starts a snap this season, no one's going to care or no one's going to mention it. If Shedeur never gets a game on the field, there will be some people who clamoring to see him get on the field. He's not going to get 2-3 years like a high draft pick is normally going to get, but I'd be shocked if Shedeur Sanders doesn't get at least a couple games for us to find out how good he actually can be. And the situation is not going to be great. That's the thing about if you're a 1st round pick and you have the big traits, we'll find reasons to be patient and find new coordinators and rebuild the offensive line and get you more weapons. But when you're a late round pick like this, you're going to get a shot. You better ball out, because if you don't, then no one's going to be willing to invest in you.
Jeff, I keep coming back to this. I know that it might sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but if everything else was exactly the same, but he had been drafted in the 2nd round, we would be saying, how long will it take until Shedeur Sanders becomes the starting quarterback in Cleveland, based upon his body of work in college and the people who are already there. And if he is as good as that, then I still don't see any reason why it won't wind up getting there. Jeff, what's your sense?
If ifs were fifths, we'd all be drunk, Greeny. He wasn't drafted in the 2nd round. And quite frankly, that's part of the reality that he now faces. I mean, that's it. He's got to earn the job. And this is a team, by the way, who doesn't necessarily believe he's better than Dillon Gabriel. Otherwise, they would have drafted him before that. Yes, he'll get his opportunity. I completely agree with Dominique. At some point, he's going to see the field, and it's a matter of what he does with that opportunity when he gets there.
The traits, Tim. I mean, you study the quarterbacks coming in. You know what they are. The traits, all the things that I hear people like you telling me make quarterbacks good are the things that he's supposedly good at. He's not that big, he's not that fast, and he doesn't have a cannon for an arm. But his processing and his ability to read defenses and his anticipation, all that stuff, those are his strengths. Those are the things that I think make quarterbacks good. And will those, I guess my question is, will those things show themselves in a relatively limited sample size?
Yeah, I mean, Greeny, they may, but like we're also looking at it from a situation of like, I think you could apply that same factor to Kenny Pickett. But Kenny Pickett was a first rounder who I thought had, as a first round prospect, had from a physical standpoint, not first round traits. He was much older, but he had played a ton of games in college, put together, a really good season at the end of his career at Pitt, and found himself, as a first-round draft pick. But look how hard it's been for Kenny Pickett. Look how hard it's been for those traits, the good decision-making, the processing to show through, and he's had a huge sample size. He was anointed the starter in Pittsburgh. Like, that's not going to happen for a fifth-round pick. It's just not. So, yeah, like some of that is there, but your opportunity to show it, look, with as crowded as it is hard. Talking 2 preseason games and then splitting it evenly, 25% of the reps across the board with all their quarterbacks. And I got news for you. No matter what they say that they're going to do that, they're not. They're not doing that. They're not going to split it evenly at 25%.
All right, I have to leave it there. We're out of Cleveland. Are you buying or selling?
I'm selling that. I mean, the reality is that quarterback room is super crowded. We've been talking about that, since the draft. And the guys that are in that quarterback room are qualified to win the job. Joe Flacco's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Kenny Pickett's a former first rounder that started games last year for the Super Bowl winning Eagles. So I just think that reps sound like they're going to be fairly even. And I believe that the guys that have the experience, like Flacco and Pickett have the upper hand in the competition if that's how it's going to go in Cleveland.
All right, I'm going to bookmark the starting week 1 piece of this in a minute. For those of you who haven't heard it, I wanted you to hear what Deion Sanders said. That's obviously Shedeur's father. He was on the Say What Needs to Be Said podcast with Asante Samuel. By now, you've probably all heard about all these reports that Shedeur Sanders wasn't prepared for meetings ahead of the NFL draft and whatever it was in his behavior that caused him to fall to the 5th round. Here's what Deion said about all of that.
When you sit up there and say something like he went in a meeting unprepared, like, dude, Shedeur Sanders, who's had 6 different coordinators, who has still functioned and went up, leveled up every time we brought somebody new in, and you're gonna tell me you're gonna tell me he had on headphones. Shedeur, anybody know my son, understand he's professional. Like, he's gonna go into the meeting with headphones on, like, y'all come on.
So the fall, for lack of a better word, because it was more than a slide. I mean, it was a plummeting of Shedeur Sanders in the draft. Remains one of the most surprising things that I've seen happen in sports in all my time at ESPN. And Jeff Darlington, I guess I would ask you, as you hear Dion saying what he's saying there, what is your reaction?
Well, I certainly don't think I'm not interested in debating whether Deion's right about in terms of Shedeur and whether he had the right attitude in meetings. I think that, quite frankly, something happened. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's simply physical, where teams evaluated him not necessarily as a franchise quarterback right now. Maybe they didn't feel like he had the right attitude in meetings. Whatever the case may be, we know that Shedeur Sanders now is going into a situation where it will be more difficult. It will be more difficult because he's going into a quarterback room that is very crowded, one that will require